Hello and welcome to a special shakedown. Tonight we're talking the 10 count, sort of state of 10 count. And this has been an episode that I have been looking forward to since Brian and I started talking about the shakedown. And the reason that is, well, there's several. And that's because, and I speak for our guest today that will be coming up shortly, and Brian, and of course myself, in that we love and care about 10 count. We have spent 17 years, 17 seasons, not only creating 10 count, but adapting to the times and changing with not only technology, but also with the product, with WWE, with soon to be, AEW, and you got NXT and spoilers. And, we've worked hard to not only adapt to those changes, but also to keep things fun and competitive and invigorating, and also to create a community where everyone is supported and has fun and it feels welcomed. And so we wanted to give you a sneak preview and to kind of show you what it's like inside the minds of Brian, myself, and our guest today, and how we came about to create not only 10 count, but to come up with some of the changes and ideas throughout the 17 seasons that we've done this. So that's what tonight is about. So if you'll join us, and even at the end, we actually want you to take part in the process, but we'll talk about that and so much more. Ladies and gentlemen, he's Brian and I'm Adam, and here comes the shakedown.
All right, welcome to the shakedown, everybody. Like Adam said, this is a special kind of state of 10 count, and like Adam said, we did not come alone tonight. We have someone that has been very impactful in the last 17 years of the 10 count division, and he has been here almost since day one. Came in the first season, midway through the first season, has been here ever since, and he's been part of the brain trust of us three, me, Adam, and I present to you our guest today, Mr. Aaron Reed Scott. If he didn't leave us.
Here he is.
That was a short visit. Okay, guys, have fun. It's a wonderful time. Hello, how's everybody doing?
Right.
Woo! It is so great to have you on, Aaron.
Yeah. Long time.
I'll let you talk in a second, Aaron, but this is my show. But no, like, in all seriousness, like, I am so excited that all three of us are together tonight talking about 10 count, and something that, and I'll let you touch on this, Aaron, like something that we've all put a lot of time, effort, and energy into, and something that thankfully has been around to create not only and keep our friendship strong, but has helped us create other friendships and bonds with people who we may not have met or been around before. So, Aaron, I'm going to give you the floor to kind of talk about that a little bit, and then we'll get into actually talking about the state of 10 count.
All right.
Yeah, as I said, I mean, when you said 17, it almost hurt because in a way, but at the same time, it's like, but it's been a wonderful time. I mean, and from where we started, I mean, we were in middle school when this all started. Yeah. I mean, going back 17 years, you're talking about Goldberg and Brock Lesnar being champion, I think. Okay, maybe not much has changed since then. But, I mean, it's just a lot, it kind of explains even like how we kind of became friends, with just, learning about, wrestling, going, wait, you watch wrestling? Wait, you watch wrestling?
Yeah.
And actually coming together and kind of form this friendship. And then over time, as you said, we brought a lot of people in that, you never knew, enjoyed wrestling, or it's people that we learned, like we would talk about with our other friends, and they're like, well, I watch wrestling, and we brought them in, and now look at where we're at. I mean, that's, we got a great group of, people that, that enjoy, what is presented, good, bad, or the ugly, or cinematic nowadays.
Yeah, and that's the point. Like I kind of wanted to make is like, no matter the one thing that I want to make sure, and one thing that the reason I still keep up with wrestling is because of this group. And the one thing I want to make sure that we create is something that people can enjoy, no matter how good or awful the product is, from WWE or, whatever, like no matter how great or how we don't enjoy it, you still have this group to have fun with it and to keep, that kind of camaraderie and just, I don't know, bond and be a group and have fun.
Well, yeah, even just to share with somebody, that isn't just I would say like a nameless face in a comment section on a channel.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as I said, when you get on there, there's a great chance you'll see that person in a couple of weeks at an event. I mean, until they eventually come up, of course, but you're going to see them and be able to talk to them and continue this actual conversation of, wow, do you believe what they did there? Or, oh, I'm so close behind you, I'm going to catch up, in terms of competition,
Yeah.
And that's kind of the fun with it too. You kind of have this competitiveness that, everybody kind of brings also, but then also at the same time you enjoy it for just enjoying it, and trying to figure out, what's behind it, or be able to talk to other people, like-minded as you are.
Yeah, and you made a good point, Aaron. I mean, wrestling is, kind of the main reason, like, we did become friends in the first place, the three of us, and the reason why, this is kind of how this all got started. We became friends in middle school, and from there we, came up with the idea of picking matches and whatnot, and we can get into that maybe later. But I just want to kind of piggyback off what you said earlier. Is wrestling kind of brought us together, and that's kind of what has brought everybody in 10 count together. Is the wrestling and whatnot, the picks. So it's a lot of fun, and glad that we are still going strong after 17 years. Wow, unbelievable, man. Wow.
It's true. And, kind of, I think the one thing that, again, that I touched on in the intro that has kept us going on for 17 seasons is we have changed with the times. And, whether it be, Brian, you can attest to this. When we first started, we got picks at school or we called people on the telephone.
Yep.
And that was it. And then, yeah. And, and which was fun in some ways because you also had conversations with people and, we would talk about picks to an extent. And then, we kept with the times, and then it went to MySpace. So we got picks through MySpace.
That's
and
right.
Then
wow.
We had a brief, we had a brief time.
Forgot about that.
Yeah, and then finally Facebook became what it is, and Messenger opened up, and so I did Google Forms, and so now people can do it electronically on their own time and not have to worry about being home at a certain time. Or,
I remember that.
Yeah, and leaving messages back and forth, and so and sometimes Aaron would help
the
me.
Changing of the matches.
Yeah, and so
that's right.
Because back then because of stuff like that, we would cut it off. If anything happened after Thursday or Friday, it didn't count. Oh well, it was out because
That's
it was
right.
too difficult. Because it was too difficult to try to get back on that phone tree and try to talk to people. But even going as far as creating websites and online results and stats so people can keep up with it in real time. And, we've done a lot like that to keep things, easier for people to kind of keep up with. Because and I kind of want to touch on this first before we start talking about some of the changes we've made that have been more impactful than just, websites and stuff like that. But, I feel like we each have our own strengths, and that's what makes us work well together. I'm the guy that likes to look out for something that's going to be user friendly and something that that people will be able to follow along with easily. If it gets too in the weeds and people have to, keep this, and this in mind, people get where they don't care.
Yeah.
Whereas Aaron is like, and again, I'll let you guys kind of expand on this, but Aaron is our logics guy. He's our historian, our mathematician that kind of remembers. Yeah, he remembers our stuff, and he can also kind of like look at steps that are coming ahead or things that we need to look out for. If we do this, then we'll need to watch out for this, and this. And Brian is our guy that has his sports background, and so he has these round robin and all these other tournaments and seedings and like competitive background. So he kind of knows how some sports and athletics and stuff work, and so we're able to take those but tweak them for our own uses. And of course, we all have great ideas that we come together and kind of work to tweak and make our own.
Yeah, just to kind of go into, and I'll let you talk about your arithmetic and logic in a minute, Aaron. But I'll talk about kind of what I bring to the table in this, and that's the sports background and whatnot. And that's kind of the reason that I actually thought of even having 10 count initially when I pitched the idea to Adam and Kenny, founding member. We'll talk about him in a minute, because what I always still do, pick the NCAA tournament every year and like the ACC tournament, basketball and whatnot. So I thought, it'd be awesome to pick wrestling matches, pay-per-views, and see who we thought would win. So that's kind of how the idea started of 10 count back 17 plus years ago. And then as far as like my round robin ideas and whatnot, obviously in sports and most leagues, teams play each other once or twice, and then they have a tournament, and then they determine the champion, and typically is how that works. So that's kind of what I had thought about. I don't even know what season that was. It may have been season 1 or 2.
Pretty much any tournament we've ever had, you want to do round robin.
Yeah, and then not as much anymore because we're too big, obviously now. Too many guys. But I'm all about round robin. You can ask the guys, even when we do NBA 2K tournaments against each other, we play each other usually twice, then we have a tournament. So that's how you do it, in my eyes anyway. So being from sports. But anyway, see, I was trying to get back on track here. You got me off track there, Davis.
Gotta be on your feet, baby. You gotta be able to move. And
please note, I was also going to say, at one point in history, do note this. There was a point where Brian did not ever consider round robin an idea. He would absolutely refuse it being an idea, and then all of a sudden one day he's like, "Hey, I got a great idea. Let's do round robin." I'm like,
That is true. I did because I think Aaron had talked about it at first, and I believe I was against it, and then later, I was for the round robin. Basically, everybody playing each other and then doing a tournament after, which is what we do for the Alliance Tag Team Division. Is everybody plays each other once. Some teams play each other twice, and then based on points, we seed each other. So everybody gets seeded, and then we have the tournament and determine the winner. So that was one of my thoughts back in the day. Obviously, now we are too big for that. And we could talk about the Keep Invitational Tournament later and how that's evolved. But, Aaron, you talk about what you bring to the table from your standpoint.
Well, I was going to say, actually, going off of the round robin conversation for a quick second, I mean, that is part of, the things that we've had to adapt over time because, as you said, our group size has grown, changed, and how we interact, especially once we got the power of the internet really on our side, that did change a lot. And that's part of the things that, we've had to adapt to because I wasn't one of the ones that came up with the idea. I joined in actually late season 1. A lot of people may not be aware of that. I've always just felt like I've been there since the beginning, but pretty much almost. I mean, I just came in and joined in last minute, but you have to think about at that time, we did not have any way of doing fantasy. Like today, you can just go on your app and pull up basketball, football, hockey, maybe Quidditch now. I mean, who knows? There's so many different ones. And
take a shot every time Aaron mentions Harry Potter, please.
But with that, I mean, the only thing back then was they had WW, I think F at the time, fantasy.
Yeah.
And we have aspects of that, but again, it was just this large conglomerate thing that, I don't think they even did it for the full year. I think it was 3-month segments. You had to pay money, and it's that's not, Well, one, I don't think we were legally allowed to at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
But
mean, go ahead.
but again, that's part of the thing. Remembering, I just had that thought about thinking back history because as I'm, brought up, a lot of things I pull back from memory on like comparing situations because, the WWE is always adapting and changing, and they, when we've coming up with ideas, trying to come up with these things, going, hey, let's do this new tournament, or will round robin even work, and having to, come together and try to figure that out, that's one thing I've always brought to the table, I may not necessarily be on I'm more behind the scene guy almost in a way
It's true.
on making sure this all works, in logic.
And plus,
Yeah.
like something that you're also good at is like remembering certain situations. And so we're able to, like, when we are faced with something that maybe we haven't seen before, or if we have, we don't remember, but you're good at going, oh, yeah, you remember that was at Judgment Day this year. And then I'm able to go back and look at the stats and go exactly where we need to go and see what we did at that point so we can stay consistent. And so, but yeah, like you said, logic and history. But sorry, I just wanted to interject.
Oh no, you're fine. And trust me, and that's one of those things. Like, I may have the memory, but like remembering what we did, I mean,
yeah,
if it wasn't for your record keeping, I mean, that is one thing I think a lot of people forget that you do all. You don't. You just come up with the stats. I grant you, Google Docs has made a whole lot friendlier on coming up with averages and being able to keep, a history of it. But back in the day, you used to do this all by pen and paper.
Yeah. Actually.
Oh, what we got here?
Breaking it out. Wow.
It's still here.
History.
Still here. Yeah. And I will give it to you. Like, Google Docs has helped a lot in kind of not only being able to go back and look at stuff and figure out how we need to maybe make a call and stuff. It's made it a lot easier. But it also has made the job quicker, and like how results have gotten quicker. And like, I have the distinct advantage of being able to put in a formula and stats and just letting it go. Brian is a little bit has to delay his because of fantasy points, but I still feel like we still, given that, like, it is so much quicker. And and we were doing this stuff before, as Aaron mentioned, like before DraftKings was doing stuff that they're doing. And and so I think we have come up with a good way because of our individual skill sets, and we've come up with something that is lasting and that we're obviously going to continue to correct. And I think some of the big things that have kept us around have been stuff like, for example, probably one of my most proud moments for a 10 count is when we came up with a points format. And like, I don't mean to toot our own horns, but I feel like we did a pretty good job of not only we sat down at my kitchen table.
Yeah, I was about to say.
And for a whole day, and we just figured out like how we wanted to shape it. And I feel like because we did that had built a roadmap to fill out not only a points format, but a league.
Yeah, and just to let everyone know about the points, obviously every match prior to the point system was 1 point, no matter if it was title match or anything. Every single match was 1 point. So we had a lot of ties and stuff. So that's one reason why we wanted to come up with a point system. And plus to be a little more fun and dynamic and whatnot instead of 1 point. And I think, Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, it was either season 4 or 5 that the point system started. I don't remember. It's been so long now, but
season 5, 2009, 2010. And yeah, like we wanted it to be more competitive, and we wanted to like actually give people a chance to have a chance to come back if they did have
true.
And it's harder to do that when everything's 1 point.
If you got down by 10 points with 2 pay-per-views left, it was almost, insurmountable lead to come back because you had to get 10 matches more than they did. And that's almost, like I said, insurmountable. Now you can be 25 points behind going into even WrestleMania and technically catch up with how many points are on the line. So it makes it a lot more fun, like I said, dynamic and whatnot. So, yeah, we sat at Adam's kitchen table pretty much all day. And we did the same with Keaton Invitational, and we'll get to that again in a minute. But that was a fun time.
Yeah, we had pizza that night. My parents got us pizza, and like we were still working. Like when dinner time, like we were still hammering
right.
out details. And Aaron, what do you recall from maybe not necessarily that day, but like when we did decide to go, okay, let's do a point system, but let's like what was some of the what I want to ask you both this. Not only that, but also what are some of the things that you wanted to make sure that this league has that kind of would set a good foundation for whatever we decide to do in the future. Like when we make rules changes, points changes, or just anything that affects the league in a big way. Like what are we looking for?
I remember I remember more or less when we started actually figuring out the formula. I remember one of the biggest things was we're seeing her going. We want the main event to determine championships. Whether you put that in terms of the Big Four pay-per-view at the time, or even the main event of these matches, in logic, we're seeing her going. No offense to anybody on the lower card in wrestling, but it was like we just didn't want to see necessarily. I'm trying to think like Funaki in a cruiserweight championship match on SmackDown pay-per-view 3 months beforehand, determining pretty much the whole championship.
That's true.
And I remember we were sitting there going, okay, we've got to come up with something. And it was like, and this is, we started slowly like, okay, well, what if we kind of did different stacking of matches? And then I remember the biggest thing was seeing there just pulling up this insane list, which thankfully at the time WWE within like the past like year or two had came out this list of all these stipulations.
Yeah.
And then and then we eventually, I remember, I'm trying to remember when we did it. You may have to clear my head on when we decide a special occasion versus specialty match. And that whole division.
We had. That was a long discussion. Davis, I know you remember that probably.
Yeah, that was back and forth. And we finally, like, what really helped was we finally got strong, solid definitions there. But that took us time. And even after that day, I think, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure after that, we still had to go through several times to get some of the specialty and special occasions right. And I remember still having to explain special occasion to myself sometimes, but also like Brian and like make sure we clearly understood like what they are. And because a special occasion is like, maybe that's not the best name for it, but at the time that's what we came up with. And
it's almost a stipulation kind of,
but it's not, because it's usually, and so, but it's something that is important, because like some of your most important stipulations after the fact are special occasions, because it's when people get fired. That's when people have to leave the brand. Yeah, when people, like stuff like that. So that stuff is just
storyline development.
Exactly. Yeah. That stuff is almost as important as a championship. Yeah. And so we wanted all of that to reflect that, we had certain tiers that like, knew a championship meant something, and it had to mean more than just a singles match or a tag match, even though, obviously all matches, are important in the grand scheme of things, but there are certain things that carry more weight. And we wanted to make sure our point system kind of continued that. And, and that's why, and we'll get into it in a little bit, but there's been some suggestions and ideas throughout the years where they wanted certain matches to mean more, and they can't always, because we have a system, and you have to follow that system or else it all breaks down. And Brian, I kind of wanted, how about you kind of touch on like, what are you looking for in terms of when we make big decisions, or just something that's going to impact the day-to-day in 10 count? Like, what are you looking for? What criteria do you want to meet with that, if that makes sense?
Come out like making decisions like
bigger decisions that are going to impact the day-to-day of 10 count. Like, what do you see as something that has, like, when is it important to address certain things, and what are you looking for when we go to problem solve?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm looking for all of this to obviously be on the same page and whatnot when we come up with whatever we're doing, just like when we were looking at the point system, and it always needs to be fair and make sense too, whatever we were doing with this point system again, or any type of decision and whatnot, and we always talk it out and make sure that we all are on the same page again and all of that. So I guess that's kind of basically, what I'm looking for there, and make sure we have a distinct differences between like special occasions, different title matches, and that kind of thing, and just make sure that we're very organized and everything that we do. So.
And, because I think the whole thing of it is like we don't want to walk over what we've already created.
Right.
We want to follow in
the footsteps.
Yeah, we want to follow in the footsteps of what we have, the foundation we have laid. We don't want to mess that up.
Right.
And so that's why sometimes we're very careful about, suggestions that come to us, because it kind of trumps what we've already created.
Yeah.
And maybe it kind of it mutes some things, or it overshadows certain things. That's why we're very careful about how we go about things. Then we'll address that more in a second when we get to some changes that we've actually made recently. But there was somewhere else I wanted to go. Oh, yeah, let's go ahead and talk about the Keaton Invitational Tournament, because that's another big thing we did also the same season. It's just a little bit later. But, because we did the tournament. We did tournament for years. And as Brian, you kind of alluded to, there were a lot of ties because it was 1-point matches, and people going head to head, like it's going to happen. And so we finally came up with something that I'm very proud of. It's also something I'm very proud of in terms of the Keaton Invitational Tournament, and it's a little bit different now because we have so many people. But like I just love how we kind of came about and built us a unique tournament for us. And Brian, I'm going to let you kind of talk about the Keaton Invitational and why it's so important, and then Aaron will kind of dig a little deeper, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, definitely. Before we did have 3 other tournaments before the Keaton Invitational. One was called, I think, Dash for the Cash.
Yeah.
Latino Heat, and I can't remember what the other one was called.
Give me 2 shakes of a lamb's tail, please.
But anyway, while Adam's looking that up, we had the 3 tournaments before we had the Keaton Invitational, and that made its debut in season 5, which was 2008 and 9 season, right? That Adam.
Yes.
And the reason why we named it the Keaton Invitational Tournament, I know we've said this before. One of our founding members, Kenny Keaton, he passed away in 2008, so we thought it would be in honor of him to name the tournament.
2009.
2009.
That's played 2009.
Yeah. So we thought that it would be good to name the tournament after Kenny, and kind of honor him and whatnot, since he was, like I said, a founding member of 10 Count and helped us come up with the idea. And he was on the very first phone call. It was me, Adam, and him, and we actually picked WrestleMania 20 that year, and that was the first pay-per-view we picked prior to season 1. So he has definitely been a huge impact to us. And we came up with a tournament, and basically we seeded everybody from after WrestleMania to SummerSlam, and then at SummerSlam we would have matchups, and it would be kind of like, this is where I was talking about my sports kind of came in. We would seed everybody, and it would be like the 8 versus 9, 10 versus 7, 6 versus 11, and so on and so forth, and people would get buys as well. And that's where I wanted Aaron to come in a minute and talk about the buys. We had a big discussion about how points would work then. So we came up with a point system for each round, and I believe it was for the first round, Adam. It may have changed over the years. I think it used to be 2, 3, 4, and 5. First round was 2, second 3, 5, and I know now it's different, but I believe that's how it was. And then obviously the winner will be crowned hopefully at WrestleMania if we didn't have ties. And the Keaton Invitational Tournament's been strong since 2009, still going today, different format. Adam maybe can explain that after Aaron talks in a minute about what he thinks about tournament, and then we could talk about the points and how Aaron kind of helped come up with this genius idea of the buys and how we were going to incorporate the points there.
Yeah, I was saying that. I don't even remember that I'm the one that came up with the buys. That's what's crazy in my head right now.
Yeah.
There's so many.
Yeah, no, he's right.
But yeah, I remember it was like one of those things I remember, because one thing I think that, we want to emphasize that we've always tried to do, especially us 3, is keeping it a fair and balanced system for everybody. and somebody might have forgot to plug in a charger. Give me a sec. Sorry about that.
Rookie
And
mistake.
so I know professionalism always has peak, but I remember it was like when we're coming out the idea, for a tournament, trying to figure out, how to rank everybody. And it was like, okay, based off previous performance, great. But then one of the biggest things that when we started introducing the tournament as a new competitive edge in the regular season, and then as that trying to figure out how do you divide up these points to where everybody gets, that fair shot, still earn it without nobody gaining advantage because they had a previous advantage except for who you took on.
Yeah.
And as I said, I don't remember 100% coming out with the buys. I know I was there for conversation, but I mean, were we at this point allowed to drink alcohol? That may be it.
I don't think so.
Not yet.
I don't
Oh,
think so. No,
darn.
no.
That's my memory going. But as I said, trying to come up with a fair system, that's always been one of the most difficult things because, and we'll allude to some of this later down the road in the conversation, I'm pretty sure, is when we come up to a point, especially like after a match result, and we sit there and go, well, how do we make this fair? What is the best solution on how to judge this time and for future cases? One of the biggest things we're always involved in the matches too. So like I may sit there and be on the losing end of the point result, but also having to come back and make a fair judgment at the same time and go, hey, I realize I lost. I would rather have it the other way because boy, I would love those points, but at the same time, doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And like that's been always one of those challenges, and like again, even like with the tournament, because we're the one that's assembling and we're involved in the decision too.
Yeah.
And so I think it's when it came down to the tournament, I remember, just sitting there and trying to figure out new ways, especially once we got more members, especially after those magic numbers, because like the tournament brackets that, Brian's talking about, your magic numbers are 4, 8, 16, 32, like.
Yeah.
And at one point we did not have 16 people. It was great when we got to that number because that made life a lot more easier, or 15 to where there's predetermined brackets that's standardized basically. And this is where ideas like round robin started coming into conversations and stuff, and trying to figure out new innovative way of trying to get around these hiccups, I guess we'll call it. Because every year there's always something new that's always added. And a couple of these years it was simply trying to redistribute the numbers to make sure it works out, including pay-per-view numbers. Because every year it seems like they change the number of pay-per-views. And
that's right.
Do we count it? Don't we count it? It's like, ugh.
Yeah, and Adam, you can talk about this too, but we always tried to make sure we had, because for like the first round we would do usually SummerSlam, and the next 2 pay-per-views would be 3 pay-per-views, and then we'd have a bye in case there would be ties, and then we would do 2 pay-per-views, have a bye, and then do WrestleMania. And then if we were tied at WrestleMania, we would go on in the next season if we had to. But yeah, that's kind of how we did, because we didn't want it to be one pay-per-view and done. We wanted to give people multiple opportunities in case you did bad one pay-per-view. You could come back the next pay-per-view and make up for it and maybe end up advancing. So that was, we talked about that all day, though. I think that was also a whole day event as well.
That was as well, because like, again, like we love the competition, but we like making people earn it. And that's one of my, again, the tournament is one of my favorite things is, and, especially like having the break in between the different rounds so that, because we did have a lot of ties, and that was a problem with the tournament itself that we had issues with in previous tournament, which Brian, to answer your question, it was round 3 tournament is what we called it. So such a genius name.
Classic.
I think it might have been
Classic.
Yeah, it sounded like something I came up with, honestly. But no, it's kind of like that was a big problem we had with tournaments is there was a lot of ties. And so the one thing we want to make sure we did in the Keaton Invitational bracket, which we're on our 11th one this year, I believe, is to make sure that we didn't have to worry about as much about ties, and we do have tiebreakers in place in case we do, but we also wanted that competitiveness and for people to know that, okay, because it's so easy to have one bad pay-per-view and you're out, and like we didn't want that feeling, especially since, as Aaron alluded to earlier, it plays a big part in
Yeah.
the championship standings. And you've heard Alan say this, you've heard, I think, Tim and a couple other people
Morris and Mike,
have echoed how much you can get done if you do great in a tournament. Like even if you're behind, a tournament win, a championship tournament can give you, and I think Tim did that this season. He won the championship and the tournament, I believe.
Yeah.
Correct. And so I think he might be the first one to do both in the same season, I think, in terms of the Keaton Invitational, I think, but I'll have to double check that. But anyways, like it can help you, even if you don't win the championship, it can put you in the hunt for it.
Yeah.
And so that's, again, another thing I'm proud of. And, Aaron coming up with a buy situation where a lot of us didn't want to necessarily give people a head start. We didn't want to, just because you're already having a great season doesn't mean we don't want to give you yet another foothold, and so that's why we made the option where if you did get the buy in round 2, you got the buy in round 1, so you go to round 2. If you lost round 2, you got 0 points, meaning you didn't get that foothold. But if you won round 2, then you got not only round 2 points, but you got the bonus round 1 point for it.
You do end up getting both, but you have to win.
But you had to win it, and that was a smart thing from Aaron to come up with, because it rewards you. Yeah, it rewards you for performing, and and it's not easy, no matter, because as we all have noticed, doing 17 seasons of this, you can start out well. That can be easy to do sometimes, but keeping that up is a whole different thing.
Just like real sports, we've seen so many times teams start off great and then they just, fall off the face of the earth. So you have to be consistent the whole season.
Exactly. And so so that's, again, like why we didn't necessarily want to keep rewarding people just because you're doing well at first. And, I remember having long discussions about that. And so, again, this is another thing I'm very proud of. Unfortunately, we don't get to use that system as much because we have, fortunately, a big group of people that I'm happy that now we don't do head-to-head matchups anymore. It's, you got to be in the top 18, you got to be in the top 16, and you got to keep grinding and make it and have, be in a certain position. But I think those are probably 2 big cornerstones that have changed 10 count. And I think the reason why 10 count is still around is because of those decisions right there.
Yeah, and Adam, talk a little bit about how we came up with the decision when the Keaton Invitational Tournament changed, because we had so many people.
Yeah.
And we went like from 18, 16 down to, whatever the numbers are. Explain how we got that idea and how we executed that.
That was something I stole from NASCAR.
Yeah.
And like other groups, I mean, other professions, other sports have done stuff similar to this, but NASCAR did that. Because Jimmy Johnson was getting a lot of championships and a lot of wins, and so to kind of change things up, they started doing this kind of elimination rounds. And so I took it to the guys and I'm like, why don't we do this for the tournament? We've got so many people in here, and I want to make sure everyone has a shot at getting points and earning, a spot in the championship, not only a tournament but season champion.
Yeah.
So why don't we start doing that? And so we did. It's as simple as that. I don't exactly remember how if we really did too much. Aaron, maybe you remember, but
I remember with it, we were coming into the problem where every year we kept adding on 1 or 2 members, and we kept saying, what if we get past 16? Yeah. And that was the magic number, because going back to the original tournament talk, the 4, 8, 16. The next stop is 32 people. And Adam, I think, was just so thrilled about an idea of trying to keep track. I mean, thankfully, it's gotten a lot easier.
Yeah.
But seeing there and possibly having the call or keep trying to message everybody individually, 32 people, it was like, that's not necessarily feasible, but we want to be able to still continue growing. And I remember it was like, okay, well, what do we do? And we did a couple of rounds where you had 17, 18 people. You were okay, but it wasn't easy to maneuver, especially with how wrestling has these natural breakoff points. We were running out of natural breakoff points.
Yep. And I mean, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, he was like, great, WrestleMania makes it easy. ending, Royal Rumble gets you really start rolling, especially like if it's the semifinals, that works. But going beforehand, you just kept having to slice and dice. You're losing our tiebreaker rounds because sometimes, especially like this time of year, a lot of your pay-per-views seem to go down to these 4 to 6 match cards that are kind of similar, and you started getting a lot more ties, and it was like, all right, you got 4-point matches. Well, most people got 3 out of the 4. Didn't matter which one it was, you still got 12 points, and then you have a tie still. And so we were trying to figure out, how do we get away from having to, in some way, use technicalities to determine winners.
Exactly.
And those were the tiebreakers. I mean, they worked, but it was like we didn't want every round, every champion to be determined by a tiebreaker.
Yeah.
And we were starting to have that happen again.
Yeah, and essentially, like, that's actually what we did, later on in the tournaments was, we kind of did if you had to be in the top 16 to make the tournament. If you weren't in the top 16, you didn't make the tournament. I mean, it sucks, but, you had, 3 or 4 pay-per-views to get there. And again, like y'all alluded to earlier, WWE kept messing with us. And some years we'd have more pay-per-views than others. And so it's kind of hard to set up a tournament when you don't know how many pay-per-views you're going to have and when they're going to be. Because again, another thing that I wanted to say that I'm so proud about the tournament is how we incorporated the Big Four into the tournament, and how they are, even still today, cornerstones in the tournament, in terms of SummerSlam, in terms of the Royal Rumble, Survivor Series, WrestleMania. Those are obviously elimination pay-per-views, but they mean so much to WWE fans, the universe, but also WWE itself. And so it's only right that we honor those. And so that's, again, another thing that I'm kind of proud of.
Even when they started including Money in the Bank in that,
exactly,
a lot of people, and it just happened to line up with this perfect formula, because a lot of times they went Money in the Bank, SummerSlam. Well, Money in the Bank's it, guys. You got to get in, got to cash in mentality. If you don't, you don't make it. I mean, and so that's the one beautiful thing about, I think that's also kind of led, some success in how wrestling, naturally just lined up in order with this progression of the year.
Exactly. And so before we move on, is there any final thoughts on tournament or the champion or the point system before we move on to newer stuff?
Yeah, I was going to say one more thing about the tournament. We could have made it, once we got past 16, we could have made it work to get down, because you would get down to 16 would be the first round, and then you would have 16 and then get down to 12. The issue, I think, was we were going to have an extra round in there, because once you get past 16, you go to, I think it'll be 6 rounds, I believe is what it is, because you go from 16, 12, 8, 4, 2, and then a champion. So I think creating that extra round, we didn't have the pay-per-views and the time to do that, especially to incorporate potential buys or whatnot. So that is part of the breaking point of moving to what we have now.
And that's if nothing changed.
Right, yeah.
And that was the biggest thing that we've always kind of dealt with, is when we get to these tiebreakers. All right, we have no tiebreaker because they took out pay-per-view in October, or oh, great, now we have this extra pay-per-view that kind of means nothing for us, so we guess we got included in the round, but we've already determined that these 3 pay-per-views are in, so we'll make sure to include it next year. And wow, look at things like Fatal 4-Way.
Capital
that's
punishment.
about a long time. Mm-hmm.
Capital punishment.
So that's always been, and that's, I think, in some ways part of the fun from our end is always having to adapt and change quickly on trying to figure out these changes. I mean, some are more fun than others, especially like October.
October, I used to hate October because you had Hell in a Cell and what was the other one, Aaron? They were usually within 2 weeks of each other, and I always had to work.
One year I know they did. I think it was Backlash.
Yeah, and Hell in a
with
Cell,
it, and then Night of Champions. I think all fell within a 2 week pattern, but both of them still end up basically in October, with Night of Champions being the last week in September.
Yeah, and how my work schedule was, I was working on that Sunday because where I worked, we were at the Dixie Classic Fair, and then we also were at the Lexington Barbecue Festival, and so it's just like exhausting month as it is, and then you throw in these pay-per-views that keep coming and coming and coming, and it's just like, but finally, but we've moved on from that a little bit. And speaking of moving on, I kind of wanted to talk about some things that we've done recently, and also want to touch on some stuff that people have asked or have brought to our attention, like, hey, this is some stuff we should do or we should look into changing or updating. And I want to kind of talk about that before we move on to an idea that I had, and go ahead, tease it a little bit. An idea that I had that I pitched to Brian, and he and I talked a little bit about, and I also pitched to Aaron, but I don't know what his thoughts are. And so, as you listened earlier, we usually get together as a brain trust and we kind of hammer it out. And so, you're going to get to see that live on the show in a little bit when Aaron gives his first initial thoughts on my beautiful, spectacular idea.
Well, maybe. Well, that's
Maybe. Yeah. Well, yeah.
Who knows? That
Let's see
could
what
be.
Aaron thinks about it, and we'll find
Yeah.
out later tonight.
But yeah, so guys, there's been several things that we've done recently that, like some things it's just like a slight change that hasn't been, big, but there's been some things that people have asked for. And one of them is something that we actually did change, but it wasn't enough for some people. And so I want to touch on the Royal Rumble. Mike and Morris specifically, for the longest time were like, Adam, Bryan, Aaron, it's got to be worth more points. And they were correct in that it is a big match. Just like we were talking about the big 4 pay-per-views, the Royal Rumble is a big time of the year. And the pay-per-view itself sets up, and the match itself sets up for your WrestleMania season. And so we recognize that it did need more points. It shouldn't just be, I think, was it just a 4-point match, I think?
Yeah, 4.
And they were right. And so we went on and added the special occasion to it because the winner did get a shot at the championship at WrestleMania. So that gave it 7. But then they were still like, that's not enough. So, Brian, did you want to kind of talk about why we can't go beyond the 7 points?
For the Royal Rumble?
Yeah.
I'm having
oh God,
now because I can't remember the exact reason. I know obviously special occasion is 7.
Exactly.
But,
that's it. That's it, because that's what our rules say. Is because if you start and again, we all bring one thing, a lot of things to the table, but my one thing is I want this to be as simple to follow along with as possible.
Yeah, right.
I do want some fun to it. I do want some, spontaneity, and what have you. But when you get too in the weeds and when you start adding on these caveats and all this stuff, it's hard for people to keep up with. Exactly. So we have a set points format, and so when you stick to it, it's easier to follow. And the Royal Rumble could be worth more points, but when you have a specialty and a special occasion, which specialty is 4 points, special occasion is 3 points, that gives you 7 points. Would I want the Royal Rumble to be more? Maybe, because it is a big match. But if we start doing that match, then
every WrestleMania match should go up in points naturally, because every match at WrestleMania is important. All 58 of them that happen nowadays. Over all 3 days. You can give it time, but literally, it was one of those things you can keep blowing up the balloon and not realizing eventually it's going to pop.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one thing that we've always kind of tried to teeter balance. Basically we didn't want one show. It's because that was one of the things that has developed in WWE along the way is these specialized pay-per-views like tables and chairs, for example, where every match is some type of specialty match, because they would throw in a chairs match, a ladder match, a tables match, a TLC match. There's title matches in between. Some of them, they had 2 chairs matches. Why? I have no idea. 2 ladder match. And it just kept ballooning. This one pay-per-view was sitting here at a 60-point match. Meanwhile, WrestleMania is sitting here at a 40-point match card. Did we think that was fair in a way? Not really, but at the same time, if you try to keep manipulating it, it would get so convoluted.
Yeah.
And then also trying to figure out a fair system going, well, that match should have more of that match. And then we would just literally, I think confusion would honestly just set in. Not just for, the members, but also just for us trying to go, wait, did we for Royal Rumble in 2012, did we increase that because there was an extra 10 guys in there or not?
Yeah.
And things like that. So,
because you bring up a good point.
Mm-hmm.
Because, when we had that extra large Royal Rumble, we did have that discussion. Is it worth more? Because there's more guys in this.
Oh, 40 guys.
Yeah, was it more? Was it 40?
No, it was 40.
Yeah.
And pretty much the end result of it was, it pretty much just added 10, lower card talents by the time you got done. So in in foresight, it didn't matter, but beforehand we were sitting there going, does it matter more?
Yeah. And that's the thing. Oh, go ahead, Aaron.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you're right. You brought up a good point. When you start making exceptions like that, it's hard to keep track of that. And it's hard to police it. And for us, when we have set standards and set rules, we know this is how we need to rule. Now, obviously, when things change, and they do, we can sort of figure out a path from there. But if you set a precedence early that, oh, well, if we do this, and you follow that. But if you keep changing things and go, oh, well, this, you got to have consistency or else everyone loses.
Yeah, you can't have too many, like you said, exceptions. I actually wrote that down, and one-offs. I actually wrote it down here on my paper. You want to have some consistency, like you said, and that's why we didn't want to make it more than 7 for the Royal Rumble match. And it makes sense, too, because, the winner does get a title shot, so that is kind of a special occasion, and obviously on top of the 4 points anyway. So 7 made sense. And maybe, you could argue it could be worth more than 7 because some matches can be worth up to 13 points. That's what our point system goes to. But you start getting too in the weeds, then it becomes confusing and maybe not as fun if nobody understands and we have so many different exceptions and stuff. So,
yeah.
And that's what I was going to bring up. I mean, I remember there's been a time or two which, to all the members, that if you ever have a question about the points on why this match earned these points or why this match has it, you definitely ask because, sometimes we cite something or it's oh, well, we didn't know they added that to the match. And then we have to determine how that affects it. But I remember when the point system kind of first got accumulated, I remember we had several members that, would, somewhat frequently come up and be like, hey, shouldn't this match be worth this amount because of this happening in the past and this happening? Well, if you kept adding all these variations along the way, those questions would just kept, piling on and on and on because everybody would have their example of their version of why they would earn it. And here it kind of mitigates it. I mean, don't get me wrong, we do have exceptions like this year, we might be bringing up sooner than later about, cinematic matches on how that's kind of, how they looked at, that's been something we've discussed.
Yeah.
But if you brought up all these different exceptions because we did this one time here, another time we did this here and this here, it would become convoluted. And as I said, and that takes out of the fun, again, going back to winning by technicality.
Exactly.
That's not necessarily what we wanted.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And, there's been so many, there's been quite a few things that we've addressed over the past couple of seasons, and Aaron, touched on one, and I kind of wanted to touch on one that kind of goes back just a little ways. I don't know if you guys remember this, but I'm pretty sure we had some lengthy discussions, and a lot of it was on me because I was the one mainly getting picks. Once we moved on to the digital age, it was mostly on me getting picks. And for the longest time, we had chats about whether we will allow people to change their picks once they make them. Because for the longest time, we didn't. Because before season 5, a lot of matches worth 1 point. And, if people keep changing their picks, plus it was hard to keep up with because, if we were doing the phone tree. But more recently, we decided to open it up and let people change their picks at any time because it was digital. It wasn't as hard for me to keep up with because they just go and fill out a form and that's it. But we also, because one of our big fears, and you guys can expand on this if there were other ones that I'm missing, but we also wanted to be careful. And it's also a reason why I don't share the results or at least what people picked until the pay-per-view starts. It's because like you don't want people to change their picks based on what certain people are picking because they don't want to lose points to that person.
Yeah.
And that can play a factor in tournaments, and that can play a factor, especially at WrestleMania. So that's always one thing we've looked out for. But I think we realize that, especially in this day and age, WWE has changed and wrestling has changed so much that you have to change with it. And so much changes from Monday to Saturday to hell, even Sunday, that you have to keep up with that. And not everybody is able to necessarily get all the information quickly. And so sometimes there's a delay in that. And so you have to account for that. And so yet another reason why I think we made another big change, which is letting people pick and change their picks as many times as they wanted to.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we've kind of like, in terms of knowledge and like how WWE's developed, we just changed literally last pay-per-view. Two pay-per-views ago because of Talking Smack. It returned, it was a fantastic program, but now it's on Saturdays. And it comes on, I think it was 11 a.m. now, I want to say.
Something like that.
And now we're having to adapt because one thing that Talking Smack is still doing that it did before was adding on content to a pay-per-view.
Yeah.
And so then we're sitting there getting up to that point and, well, great. Now we've just added the fact of that, like, for example, they announced that Mandy Rose is now on Raw. Imagine if they did that for a pay-per-view. How would that change your influence of picks?
Yeah.
Would everybody be able to catch that in time? And that's been one thing that, trying to make sure everybody has a fair opportunity to, reevaluate as quickly as possible for the show. Some people, hate say, some people have had to make picks, earlier, and then they just never really got time to go back and catch that back up. But thankfully, with the power of the internet, you have more opportunity to do it.
And you could just
where in the
results,
past it was call. Well, great. I reach out his voicemail. Why? Because he's at work for 8 hours, and Brian, can't reach him. I message Aaron, and he said he'll pass it on, but do I trust that that he'll pass it on? It's like, and there was a lot of uncertainty with that, but again, thanks to technology, we're able to keep up a faster pace, which that wrestling has evolved into, really.
Yeah, exactly. Now, did you? I have a few more things that we have changed or have been asked to change. Did you guys think of any that we have looked at, maybe didn't necessarily do, but things that we've looked at changing or adapting to? Brian, let's start with you. Do you have anything? Did you think of anything?
I mean, I know the discussion about fantasy, should fantasy questions be part of 10 count has always been a discussion. And, and just to talk about that for a second, we want to keep it would definitely add more points to 10 count, but we want to keep the Alliance Tag Team Division 10 count separate. So that's kind of a part of the 10 count division, tag team division that's so cool and unique is the fantasy points. And so bringing that to 10 count would be fun, and it would add a lot of points, but we kind of want to keep that distinction between the two. So that's one thing that people have mentioned over the years and even, recently, but that's kind of the reason we haven't done that. And we'll get into the fantasy a little bit later as we talk about, Adam kind of talks about possibly the future here. But that's one thing I thought about. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head, but I know fantasy questions has been always like people have asked, well, why can't that be a part of 10 count? And that's kind of the reason we want to keep it separate from the tag team division. Keep that unique to that.
You only had one job, Brian. You couldn't even come up with one thing. Aaron, did you come up with anything? I'm just kidding. Did you think of anything off the top of your head?
That we tried to implement, or not implement, but trying to look back, trying to figure out. I think a lot of it that I kept thinking back to was a lot of like the little, what I'm going to call tweaks to our rulings of what is a specialty versus specialty match. And I mean, because we started talking about it where we had this great list to start with, it worked, but then we would get this new stipulation. How does that affect it? And like actually redefining the definitions of these two terms was one thing that we had to do. And I think, trying to, and then also some of these stipulations, like one thing, like a lot of people, look at special guest referee.
Yeah.
We don't consider that anything. We just said, hey, it's just somebody, different. That'd be like announcing a guest commentator.
Yeah.
Does it affect the match? Sure. But at the end of the day, it doesn't affect the result of the match per se. The referee's job is going to be the referee's job. The guy doing commentary he's there to do commentary. Now you may want to keep that back in your head when you're making your pick. That hey, Kevin Owens is coming out every week. Is he going to possibly screw somebody over in this matchup? So I think that's been like a lot of things that we've kind of went back and forth on whether we should add it or not add it or modify it. And I think like that was like one thing I've kind of thought of, especially was like these little things like the guest referee.
Yeah. Did you have something to add to that, Brian?
Oh no.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Exactly. Like
in the discussion, specialty versus special occasion, and I remember we had a long discussions about that previously. So.
Multiple, please note multiple.
A lot of hours on that, boy.
Yeah. Not gonna lie. And so one other thing that I had that we did a survey in season 15, and we had a couple people have alluded to this, or at least a type of this. And so I wanted to talk about it because as some of you probably don't know, but I reached out to Aaron and Bryan once, probably around March or April, and was like, hey, I think we need to shake 10 count up a little bit. Obviously things in the world are kind of crazy. Wrestling itself is kind of, and so I want to make sure 10 count stays competitive, fun, and engaging. And so I went back and looked at season 15 survey, and there was a few things that popped out at me, but there was one thing in particular. And so I took it to Brian and Aaron, and I was like, hey guys, what do you think about adding this? And Aaron, rightfully so, and Brian were like, hold up, maybe this may not work. But let me tell you, and then Aaron, I want to throw it to you and Brian to kind of talk through why we didn't make this change. But
because I'm not remembering this.
Oh, you're not? Oh, okay. Well, Brian, maybe you'll have to.
No. I mean, what would you? I may remember once you say it, but yeah,
you'll get it. Yeah. But so my idea, it wasn't my idea, but it was from season 15. A couple of people had submitted ideas very similar to this, and it was, what if not only do we predict the outcome, the winner of a match, but we also predict how they win. And so you would get extra points based on if you said that Kevin Owens would win by pinfall, or he would win by submission, or count out. And so I thought this was a great idea. This is something that could reinvigorate 10 count. And I took it to Brian. He's like, maybe. And then Aaron was like, well, actually, and he actually did what we do. And he went and he got, he went and he looked at some, which is something that I normally do, but I didn't do this time. But he looked at the past results and was like, well, actually, Adam.
Here's what really happened. So one of the things is, like, whenever you go and look up, I went and said, okay, this is not a bad idea. But then my first question in my head went, would this play a factor into it? And I remember I went through the last season and I looked up every match on how the results ended, both in two different ways, one for just title matches and one for non-title matches. And what it shocked me at first, and I couldn't understand why, but the match results are almost all the same. In literally, I mean, it was like 93% of these ended either by pinfall or submission, and only 7%. No, I take that back. I think it was, if I remember correctly, 7 total matches
Wow.
that ended outside of a pinfall or submission style. And even then, when you broke it down to submission and pinfall, there wasn't that many submissions. And even with the handful there was, I mean, a lot of it was revolving around, like, Charlotte or Sasha Banks that has a submission move, but a lot of times they were winning still by pinfall, and I'm like, that doesn't add up. But then when we're watching as fans, we're watching it with Raw, SmackDown, NXT, all these other shows included in there.
Yeah,
Maybe even some rewatching of Attitude Era on the WWE Network. You go, well, I mean, that match ended in disqualification, or that was a counter, or it ended by murdering, and Bray and Braun, but that's just normal. That happens all the time. Problem is, it doesn't happen all the time on pay-per-view or, on these big shows. And so when we looked at it, you could pretty much just pick the same thing and get the same result pretty much. I mean, even if you every once in a while try to throw that should be a submission, you're either going to end up just hurting yourself in the long run, or great, you get 2 extra points for that one time, and then probably somewhere down the line mess it up again.
Yeah, I'm pretty surprised, Aaron. When you went back and looked, only 7 matches, I think you said, ended outside last season.
It's a couple of weeks when I looked it up.
I didn't even, because I think I told Adam before you said that I thought most matches typically end in pinfall. I didn't realize it was that high of a percentage. I mean, that's like 90, probably 8 or 9%. I mean, at that point, and basically the point is we probably all would be picking pinfall because most matches end in pinfall. So that's kind of where we ended up coming to a consensus there that pretty much every match ends in pinfall, other than a few here and there. So
yeah, and the time and energy it would take to kind of calculate that, and to take the extra energy to make sure that those points are counted, wouldn't really amount to being worth all the time and energy that's put into it, especially when it's that many. And my idea was, or I think that there's a couple people mentioned it was, and maybe it was my idea, that we only do certain big matches for that, and at that point, it's probably going to be a higher percentage, because for the most part, your match is going to end in pinfall or submission.
Right.
And you have. Go ahead.
What I was going to say was, there was one thing I forgot to mention. When I did this lookup, I excluded every match that had a forced ending. For example, tables, ladders, and chairs, and with a title involved. You climb the ladder, you pull down the title to win. That's how the match ends. I did not include none of those. And last man standing matches. How do you win a last man standing match? You have to be counted out to 10.
Yeah.
Not too many ways of twisting that story.
Yeah.
I mean, otherwise you'll be like, well, person A is going to get counted out to 10, or person B is going to get counted out to 10. Nah, that's just a pick.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So and the thing is, I hated that, because it was like, I always agree, if we can bring something that's unique to shake it up, but in this case, just looking at it just didn't work like you would think, even though in your head it should.
Yeah, on paper it's a really good idea, but then when you get in, when Mr. Analytics over here, Aaron, when you actually get into the numbers, I didn't realize it was that skewed, and that's pretty crazy. So
yeah,
but that's
that's why we're a team, and that's why we work so well together. And it's kind of that teamwork that makes the dream work. So I wanted to touch on one other thing very quickly, and then we can move on to a big idea. So Aaron, I wanted to touch on the cinematic matches. I don't know if you recall the conversation that we had earlier. I think it's a month or two ago, especially with the Bray Wyatt versus Braun Strowman swamp match or swamp fight. We had a discussion about that. Do you recall it?
Yeah, I'm remembering too, so I'm hoping I'm not blending these all together now in my head, because again, we do talk about a lot of things. A lot of times it doesn't make it off the cutting, table. It'll just be like me and Adam chatting. Brian doesn't even get necessarily involved. It's just like, hey, just spitballing. Like, what if this happened? It's like, we'll deal with it when it gets there. But like, I remember, I'm trying to remember which one. I'm pretty sure it was Bray and Braun talking about ending in murder, and especially with Bray's other cinematic match, which was Cena and The Fiend. What happened? What happened in that match? I think by definition, we've counted him as Bray wins, but it's like, is that what really happened? I mean, and then also, if I remember correctly, didn't the Viking Warriors and the Street Profits have a moment? Drug hallucination? There was dragons, I think, involved or something, and ninjas, and that was a tag match that never happened. You see where the confusion's coming in when you're. First off, I'm saying this for a wrestling match, which is feasible, but it's not clear cut on what you actually saw at the end of the day.
Exactly, and I think that's something that we're going to keep an eye on. Is in terms of cinematic matches and what they mean in points. Like, does Bray or The Fiend actually get the points? But is also in his character. So who's to say that a swamp match doesn't end by quote unquote killing your opponent, or even like taking them and changing them in some ways? Because Braun has not been the same since, right? So.
Pretty much, right?
So doesn't The Fiend technically win that? So it's like stuff like that we always are careful of, because we want to go by the WWE rulings, but we also have to it's still entertainment. It's still a product of entertainment. So we have to kind of balance that. And cinematic matches being in the times that we're in, these unprecedented times, we have to kind of keep that in the front of our mind and go, okay, this could be something we see more of with The Undertaker and AJ. And we had a discussion, our last episode with Mike was on these cinematic matches, and are they going to be a part of our future? And so Aaron and I were talking about that, and he was kind of like, hey, this is something we need to pay attention to. And I'm like, maybe, but let's just see where it goes. Because some of it, I think, and Aaron and I eventually got there, was maybe this is just the Fiend character itself.
Right. I mean, even just last pay-per-view, one thing was I was actually working at the time, so I didn't get to watch it live. And I'm reading what's happening, and I'm just sitting there going, wait a minute, how is Roman Reigns signing the contract now?
Yeah.
And the one thing I went back and looked up was, in my head, I'm thinking, did the referee announce this as a triple threat match?
Yeah.
Because if he hadn't, according to our logic, the match would be thrown out. Now, there is, kind of like a review on the play to make sure that, we're not nitpicking it to the point that it shouldn't count. But I'm sitting there going, that's a little iffy, because, again, something a little bit different they're doing. And, again, we don't want to discourage, again, the nitpicking of, winning by technicality. But also, I was sitting there going, okay, is this something new that I want to watch out for, that Heyman's just going to be like, hey, we're going to manipulate contracts? Because that's how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
I remember, oddly, earlier, they're talking about how Otis may not be allowed to cash in his Money in the Bank contract because it technically was never a valid contract. Again, that makes no sense, but again, that would be, quote, something we would watch out for.
Right.
I think it was just a case of somebody pulled up a old document, because I even remember this. The Money in the Bank contract, just let you know what they're saying, is the Money in the Bank contract is not valid because it says 2015. But I remember there was a document made on www.com, and it was like, here is the official Money in the Bank contract and what it looks like. You can read it and confirm what it says. And I was like, I think that's all that was. But again, it would be something we would have to be mindful for. And you're sitting there going, what an odd thing to be talking about even now.
Well, yeah, and the thing is, like, normally in a regular WWE match, if like in this match, like they just start, like, I forgot what it was. Wasn't it Braun that just came in and started beating up on the Fiend? I think it was. I think if I remember correctly, but the referee just rang the bell to start the match. Normally that wouldn't happen. You know, normally they would be trying to kept apart and then the bell would ring. But like it just started, which is not normal for a WWE match. And so even from then, and then Roman never comes out. So it's like that's weird, especially when there's a third person that's in the match. Like, so again, like Aaron has been saying, like there's some things that we have to obviously always keep an eye out for.
Yeah.
But guys, I think, you know, we're at an hour 15 minutes here.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get to open this up. I want to get Aaron's opinion on something, and I want to open it up to the members of 10 Count and see what their thoughts are on an idea that I built upon. And so if you guys were with us for episode 2, we had Cameron on, and Cam had the idea of doing Wednesday Night Wars division, essentially, where we picked NXT and we picked AEW matches and pay-per-views and events. And just to give you a little backstory, so a couple of days ago, maybe a week or so ago, I was out on a walk and I was thinking, and you know, as I mentioned earlier, like I'm always, like lately especially, I've kind of been thinking, okay, how can we shake things up a little bit, have a little fun, but still keep within, you know, something that we can handle. And I got to thinking, what if we take Cameron's idea of going AEW NXT division and we kick it up to 11? We go bigger, we go bolder. What if we take it and we go all out?
AEW all out.
Bad bud.
What if we go universally elite division? We take the best of all the worlds. We not only do you pick AEW and NXT divisions, but you also pick, of course, WWE pay-per-views, your 10 count individual results. But we also take the best, in my opinion, of tag team division, and we throw in fantasy matches and bonus questions to create this one elite, like universally elite division that is open for anyone to join. You don't have to join. You can still just do 10 count, or you can do 10 count and tag team, but you have the option of going universally elite. And again, we're going to come up with a different name if this becomes something, but I thought, why not? Like we said at the beginning of the show, how we like to keep with the times, and it's not just WWE anymore. You know, there was times we flirted with TNA matches and pay-per-views, and we did that for a little bit, but that really didn't gain any steam. People lost interest in that pretty quickly. But AEW and NXT, I feel, are around to stay. People love to pick fantasy questions and bonus questions. They've been asking to do that. But we really, like Brian said earlier, we don't want to just introduce that to 10 count single division, because that's what tag team does. But I feel more comfortable doing it in addition to, like, if it's outside of, you know, 10 count and it's like one big division that combines everything. Yeah. And so I pitched this to Brian and I pitched this to Aaron. And Brian, you wanted to add something there?
Yeah. Before Aaron gives his opinion, I wanted to make the pot a little sweeter. I just actually thought of it, so we could possibly do this as well. Adam has no idea.
I don't like this.
Everything that Adam says. So we did this a couple times in the Alliance Tag Team Division, and let's see if y'all remember this. The concept was called Double or Nothing. So I don't know if y'all remember this or not. I know Adam saying he does. Basically, so you pick all the matches, and Double or Nothing means you can pick of all the matches. Let's just say you're most confident that AJ Styles, whoever he's facing, is going to win. You go Double or Nothing on that match and pick AJ Styles. So let's say the match was worth 6 points for the title. If you go double or nothing, you get it right, you get the 6 points for the match. You also get the 6 additional points for double or nothing, 12 points total. If you miss it, though, you lose 6 points. So that's where it comes in. So maybe to make the pot a little bit sweeter, we add on top of fantasy and bonus a double or nothing. Maybe not for every pay-per-view, but for some, to make, like I said, things a little even more interesting. So I wanted to add that in before we get your opinion, Aaron, on that.
Yeah. So again, we're going to go to Aaron here in a second.
All right.
But so, Aaron, you've heard all of this. Brian just added that little bit. What were your thoughts before you look at Double or Nothing? What were your initial thoughts when you opened up my novel of a Facebook message and you scrolled through it for 2-3 days? What did you think?
Well, it was a lot better before the bad puns started rolling. I mean, there was way more in there than I even realized to start with. Universal, man, really? No. It's been one of those things that we have talked about and flirted with. You mentioned TNA. That was the first time that we really thought about I guess use the term expansion,
Yeah.
I remember that didn't really fly. There was even talks about, if you remember, at one point, Ring of Honor somehow getting in this conversation. And then I remember when NXT really first started taking off, that was like, well, it's a part of the WWE universe.
Yeah.
And that's been something that we have talked about. And like, do we start including? Because then over the past year, maybe 2 years now, we've started to incorporate NXT into main roster pay-per-views on, more levels. Their champions were showing up.
Yeah.
Survivor Series, they had all of the matches. I mean, we just had WrestleMania this year with NXT on the line because of the Royal Rumble. They were involved in the Royal, so it was like it kept evolving, and AEW has been one of those things that has been gaining a lot of ground for everybody, and I think numbers wise, as long as you get enough members that are interested in it, I think we can roll with it. Because one of the things in the past was not everybody watched all these shows. Again, going to technology. I can go, not necessarily, by quote definition, could always change. AEW and NXT come on at the exact same time. The good news about it is you're able to look up that result or DVR it and go and watch it and catch up on it.
Yep.
Where in the past, that wasn't necessarily easy. You used to have to VHS some things sometimes, really going back, if you wanted to catch up on a show.
The WCW.
Easy, Brian. We're not talking about Goldberg.
Here we go.
But yeah, but I think now if we're going to implement, now is going to be the best time to implement it.
Yeah.
Because as I said, I think the biggest things is making sure that, fatigue doesn't set in for everybody, because there's going to be a lot of shows. Yeah. AEW has shown that they're going to do some weekday shows or Saturday shows, NXT does Saturday shows, You're going to cry, whenever you get to certain weekends where, what did we just come off of, a 5-show streak over a 2-week span or something like that?
Yeah, that's true. That is.
But you're also going to stay engaged. That's going to be the great news about it. And it doesn't go into affecting regular season or anything like that. You can still pick it. I think one thing that we would, this would be behind the scene I'm trying to figure out for us would be whether or not that person, if you're a part of the league, do you have to pick twice, or do you actually would like to ask them to also pick in regular season as well, on making sure both picks are sent in? Because I think for your formula, Adam, I think it would be helpful so that way he inputs it, because he's got all these great, equations made that spreadsheet cross each other. Yeah. Complex formulas and all that fun stuff. But that's where, kind of what I'm thinking. Because I think, as I said, it's one of those things that even, I may not necessarily have enough time to watch every bit of Raw, SmackDown, and whatnot, but I'm still can go check out highlight packages or catch up on other information about AEW and NXT, and even mine catching on that at one point I was purish, WWE all the way. NXT's great. Now it's horrible because there's nobody I know on there anymore. But it's like I think now we're getting to the point that the whole general scope of wrestling, you're starting to keep up with everything because all of it's interesting. Just put it that way. I mean,
and it's kind of like that's what people are talking about. Like, especially in our group, people are talking about AEW, people are talking about NXT, people are talking about WWE. But yeah, so that was my thing. And if we do expand to this new division, and do not get me wrong, this would be a new division. You would not have to opt into this if you don't want to, if you don't watch NXT, if you don't watch AEW. But this would be a way for people who do keep up with all the brands. And even if you don't keep up with WWE all the time, like you're still like, I don't like watch every single Raw or SmackDown.
No. I know you keep up with Raw Talk, right, Adam? You keep up with that, obviously. And
all
205 Live.
Oh yeah. I've actually got 2 weeks worth of 205 Live I got to catch up with after the show. But no, like, so like you don't even have to necessarily watch all of it nowadays to understand what's going on and make an educated pick, which I think is a good thing. And so that's why I think this could still be something that a lot of people are interested in. And you're right, Aaron, it is going to depend on if you are interested in picking in this new division. So this is where we open it up to everyone and tell us, one, are you interested in picking a new division where we combine the WWE, we combine NXT, AEW, and the best of tag team, which is fantasy questions and bonus points and possibly even double or nothing, which I think is a good idea from Bryan. And there's obviously, this is not going to happen overnight. There's going to be a lot of discussion between Bryan and Aaron and myself, and from you. We want to hear your thoughts, your suggestion, not only on this NXT or on the possible new division, but also 10 count and tag team. If you have suggestions for those divisions, we're all ears. So kind of wanted to wrap it up here, and I think we'll probably have another discussion on this once we get some feedback from people, if people will be interested. But I think this is something that we could grow on. And I also will say, Aaron, you bring up a good point. There's going to be a lot of logistics behind the scenes stuff that we have to figure out. But I also think it's important to let people know that we probably will be looking to expand the group, our team, a little bit in terms of results. And because like you said, Aaron, like we don't always watch everything. So I don't watch AEW. I know Bryan does. I watch NXT occasionally. And I know Bryan doesn't exactly. Could we do a match card for them? Yes. But are we educated enough necessarily to do fantasy questions? So that's where we look for the group. And I've also had like ideas on that we could look at in the future in terms of having people possibly submit or help us with fantasy questions.
Yeah.
And contribute.
Whoever else.
Well, yeah, like it could be anyone. It could have people vote on what fantasy questions they want to pick. Because that's a good thing about fantasy questions is that it's not like a trivia or a game show where you know the answers to it. The fun thing is we don't know the answers to them.
Yeah.
We're like
until afterwards.
Yeah, not until afterwards. And same thing with the matches. We don't necessarily know the outcome of the matches, but we can put you this match, like who do you think is going to win? And so I'm excited for this possible new division that we have brewing that could, again, do something that we mentioned him earlier, Kenny Keaton, one of my closest friends, and who's the reason, one of the founding members of 10 Count and the namesake of our tournament. He was having a conversation with me and Bryan one day. And he's talking about how he thought 10 Count was going to be something bigger than all of us. And since that, like even then, like afterwards, like that's what Bryan, Aaron, and myself has tried to do is make 10 Count not only bigger than just the three of us, but something that people can enjoy, have competitive fun, but also make friends and one-of-a-kind life experiences. We've been to WrestleManias together. We've been to WWE Raws, SmackDowns, NXT events. And hopefully we get back to that soon, pay-per-view viewings. And I feel like this possible new division is another way to pave the path of another trail to go down. And so do you guys have any last final thoughts before we end the show?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think, Kenny would be just happy to see where we've taken this. And no, we haven't taken it like to a global stage or anything like that. And I don't know if at the time I thought that's what he maybe meant, but I don't think he necessarily meant that. But I think we've taken it a lot bigger than we even thought we would, and I think he would be proud of it. So that definitely makes me proud, and it makes you proud as well, Adam, and I know you as well, Aaron. So it's just great to kind of see how we continue to grow and evolve and just get better and better. But Aaron, I don't think you answered the question that Adam asked about the Universal Elite Division, whatever we call it. Would you be interested in participating in this new division? So what is your answer before we go off the air?
I don't think he asked that. But
yeah, I didn't ask that, but okay.
Okay, well, anyway, I thought he did, but yeah, what's your thoughts on it?
I think I'd be highly interested. I think it'd be one of those I need personally. I want to make sure that do I have enough time to make sure can stay competitive by keeping up with AEW. I'm kind of with Adam in some things of I don't watch every show. Don't have, we're busy, chaotic schedule in life, that's one thing that we've all worked around, and being able to keep up with enough to where, I'm not just, randomly throwing out a name to hopefully get points stuck with it.
Yeah.
So for me personally, I'm more than likely I would, but I would need also see, because that is one thing that has been slowly growing for me is interest in AEW, Actually, I have Mike to thank for that, going over to his house, and me and Adam went over one night and watched was it All Out? Was it the first show, if I remember correctly?
It was like the first pay-per-view, I think it was. Like that. Well, no, the second one. I don't know. It was like the second.
It was like that. I think built up to the TV show, if I remember.
Yeah.
I think it was All Out. I think,
Yeah. Again, I'm not as WWE first way knowledge with AEW yet. Give me time. It will come. But and that got me hooked, and things that recently, maybe even a future conversation that y'all could have on this show, maybe about how, new talent on shows stirs interest. We just introduced Morrow to AEW. I obviously looked up a lot of information trying to what is he doing? What's going to be his, gimmick for, and how is he going to change AEW, that piqued my interest.
Yeah.
So as I said, I think it's one of those things for me, come around WrestleMania time, I'm imagining, if this starts formulating, and we get enough group interest, I think we might have something. Might have something.
Right. All right.
I like it.
Yeah, and one thing again before we do go off that we will have to think about as far as if we do the division, and we could talk about this offline and maybe in a future show, but I was just thinking about it, fantasy questions. If we have fantasy questions for AEW, obviously there's not an AEW network like there is WWE, so we'd have to buy the pay-per-view. So that's one topic of discussion we'll have to have as far as fantasy questions. And maybe once hopefully everything, this craziness ends with this, pandemic, we can get back together and maybe watch some AEW pay-per-views.
Yeah.
All of them. So that's a topic of discussion that we'll have later, and that's food for thought for us as well as the rest of the group if you have any ideas there. But that did come to my mind here as we wrap up the show.
Exactly.
Memories of splitting up, trying to figure out how to divide 8 into 59.99.
That was kind of fun.
What the days?
Yeah. Oh man, those are the days. Well, Aaron, thank you so much, buddy, for joining us. It was so much fun talking about the good old days of 10 Count and all that we've kind of been through for 10 Count and the kind of fun afternoons we've had. Not only,
Yeah.
where we sat there and try to figure out points and all this stuff, but also it's the times we've went on vacations and we've had chats about wrestling and 10 count, and the hours that we spent on the phone with each other talking about wrestling and 10 count and picks and stuff. And it was fun to go down memory lane tonight, and to look to the future. So thanks again for joining us and taking the time to join us. I think, Brian, do you remember your outro? Do you know how the outro works?
Does he remember? Oh, this is gonna be good. Let's see. Does he remember?
A little bit. Yeah, I think so. Before we get to that, so next episode will be the 5th episode. Obviously, be Halloween season. So I know all three of us love Halloween. I think we're going to do some sort of Halloween edition show. We'll have more details on that as we get closer to the 5th edition of the Shakedown. So be on the lookout for that. Until then, he's Adam, I'm Brian, and that was the start of something great now. Good night, everybody. Good night, everybody.